Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. I want to put you directly in the shoes of a very specific kind of millionaire. We're talking about someone who has engineered their entire life to be completely 100% invisible on paper. You know, no yachts, no flashy Instagram posts. Instead, we're going to unpack the fascinating, honestly almost clinical architecture of stealth wealth. So, for the next few minutes, just imagine that this is your life.
Imagine your actual net worth is exactly $38.4 million. That's a massive amount of money, right? Yet the guy who cuts your hair, he thinks you work in insurance, and not even some glamorous, high-powered executive role. He genuinely believes you're a standard claims adjuster, all based on something you mumbled in passing 3 years ago. You've had dozens of haircuts since then, and you've just never bothered to correct him.
In this absolute mundanity, this total lack of public recognition, it isn't an accident. It's a meticulously crafted architecture built layer by boring layer over 12 solid years. It's not just some dramatic movie-style act of stashing cash in a Swiss bank account. It's a series of incredibly small, calculated decisions designed to make you look, well, entirely ordinary.
Now, building this kind of legal maze doesn't just happen overnight. You didn't inherit a massive trust fund. At age 27, you scraped together enough to buy a single $164,000 duplex in a working-class part of town. Over the next decade, that one single property evolved into this sprawling, invisible legal labyrinth. But interestingly enough, the whole shebang started with just a passing comment from a guy at a title company.
It all kicked off when an older title guy named Reyes looked up from his stacks of paperwork and asked a simple question. Did you want the duplex in your own name or an LLC? You almost put it in your own name, because, that felt like real ownership. But Reyes warned you to use an LLC just so a simple slip and fall on an ISIS step wouldn't totally nuke your personal financial life. So you paid the $89 to file it with the state, and honestly, you didn't think about it again for 2 years. But by age 31, things were growing, and the strategy had to evolve. You brought in a lawyer named Denise, who wasn't cheap at $310 an hour, by the way, and she taught you the absolute golden rule of real estate. Never put all your properties in one basket. You were up to 6 rental units by then, and Denise made you spread them out across 3 completely separate LLCs. The goal here is simple but incredibly powerful. Compartmentalize the risk. If someone sues one building, you absolutely do not want them touching the others.
And let me tell you that $310 an hour advice seriously paid off, because eventually a tenant did fall down an icy staircase, and they sued for a massive $340,000. But thanks to your structure, the lawsuit only touched that single LLC. It couldn't reach your other 5 units, it never touched your primary house, and it completely bypassed your personal name, keeping your actual life completely insulated from a potentially ruinous event.
So the real magic is how you construct the maze as your assets grow. By age 35, those 6 LLCs had multiplied into 11. Now, managing 11 different tax returns and bank accounts, that's a literal nightmare. So Denise introduced the concept she called consolidating the tree. You created a holding company to own pieces of the LLCs and eventually a trust to own the holding company. Suddenly, you've taken 11 separate massive tax headaches and streamlined them into one single entity that you can manage quietly from your desk on a random Tuesday afternoon.
But how do you actually manage all of this without your personal name popping up on public records everywhere? Well, you hire a registered agent. For a measly $125 a year, you found a service in Wyoming, which is great because they don't require LLCs to list their owners publicly. This agent handles all your legal mail. You've literally never even spoken to them on the phone. But because of this one tiny step, your real name and your actual home address are entirely wiped off public databases.
Fast forward to age 39, and the structure is completely finished. You're sitting in Denise's office, handing over a thick folder detailing the 11 LLCs, the holding company, the trust, and the private bank accounts. She flips through it, looks up, and says, on paper, you don't really exist. She meant it as a structural compliment, kind of like an engineer admiring a perfectly built bridge. But for you, it felt like the ultimate relief. The machine actually worked.
This invisible empire creates such a wild contrast between ego-driven wealth and stealth wealth. Just take your old business school buddy, Colton. He had a big software exit, right? Now he drives this massive, loud truck with 30 grand worth of extra chrome, wears flashy clothes, and practically begs people to notice him. You, on the flip side, are driving a 2018 used Subaru and rocking a $34 clearance fleece. When people ask what you do, you just kind of shrug and say, I do some real estate. And the best part? Nobody ever asks you for money or corners you to pitch terrible investments.
But look, keeping this level of a secret does come with a very specific, heavy kind of emotional stress. It creates a profound loneliness. And this was put to the test when your sister, Renata, who is this incredibly hardworking divorced nurse raising 2 kids, called you in tears on a Sunday night. She was terrified. She confessed she was $23,000 behind on medical bills, a car repair, and a crazy sudden rent increase. Now, you could have easily paid that $23,000 in a matter of seconds. I mean, it's a fraction of what your bond ladder earns in a single week.
But here's the catch. Writing a massive check like that would immediately reveal the structure. It would expose the millions. So instead, you spend your entire Saturday sitting at her kitchen table, meticulously auditing her bills. You find a $4,100 hospital billing error. You negotiate a payment plan for her, and you fight the illegal rent hike. You manage to whittle her true, immediate debt down to $8,000. Then, you personally loan her that $8,000 from a thin personal checking account, keeping the $38 million a total secret. It definitely protects her from treating you differently, but man, it carries a quiet, heavy grief to pretend the financial gap between the two of you is actually that small. Beyond that emotional test, though, the structure also faced the ultimate legal stress test. A former business partner named OA, who somehow felt he was owed a piece of your success, slapped you with a massive lawsuit, and he named you personally. His contingency lawyer spent 4 solid months aggressively hunting for your deep pockets, desperately trying to trace any assets back to your name so they could attach a massive judgment.
And this is exactly where the architecture proved its true worth. Obray's lawyer dug incredibly deep, but he hit an absolute brick wall. Literally, all he found was a modest $410,000 house, that old used Subaru, and a personal checking account with just $7,800 in it. He found absolutely zero connection to the trust, the holding company, or any of the 11 LLCs. The $38 million was completely, entirely invisible to him.
Believing you were basically broke and there was nothing left to extract, Oway's lawyer settled for just a tiny fraction of what they wanted, $22,000. You paid it quietly from an ordinary business distribution that you'd actually planned months in advance. The lawyers walked away having absolutely no idea they had just sued a man worth nearly 40 times what they were trying to take. It was literally like watching a smoke detector you installed 9 years ago go off perfectly during a real fire.
Of course, maintaining this invisible empire isn't free, right? It requires a highly compartmentalized team where literally nobody has the full picture. The banker sees the operating accounts, but not the trust. The bookkeeper sees the cash flow, but has no clue about the total net worth. Between Denise's legal retainer, the registered agents spread across 3 states, and the family office team, it costs roughly $54,000 a year just to maintain the labyrinth. But the thing is, you don't view this $54,000 as an expense. Not at all. You view it as the ultimate insurance premium. It's a literal policy against a life where people treat you differently just because of your money. It protects you from that version of life where you have to constantly scan every room you walk into, wondering what people want from you.
And the reality of this dual life? It hits you the hardest in the absolute most ordinary moments. Picture this. You're standing in the plumbing aisle of a local hardware store, trying to figure out which pipe fitting to buy to fix a slow leak at one of your rentals. And right there, under those harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights, you open an email on your phone from your accountant. The subject line, Q1 Consolidated Summary. And right there in the hardware store, you read the final number, $38.4 million.
You're standing right next to some guy comparing PVC primers who's completely unaware that you could literally buy the entire shopping center out from under him in cash. You grab your cheap $6.20 compression fitting, head to the register, pay, and get back into your Subaru with a completely broken air conditioning. And in that moment, sitting in your sweltering car in the parking lot, you don't feel any desire to go buy a yacht or a giant chrome truck. You just feel utter, profound relief that the maze worked exactly the way it was built to.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. Building the legal structure to be a ghost on paper, that's really just a matter of mechanics and paying the right lawyers. But the psychology of it? If you quietly amassed $38 million, could you actually resist the very human urge to let the world know? Could you sit at that kitchen table, perfectly hidden in plain sight? Think about it. Until next time, keep learning.